Okay, hi everybody. Tonight we're going to have another in a series of forums on the development of Sacramento, land use and zoning, tonight of commercial corridors and community centers. 1 month ago today, we did neighborhoods and talking about increases in density and changes in projected changes through growth strategies being presented by the 2040 general plan. That strategy for increased housing types in our neighborhood has been presented by the city in a housing element that was developed. And so that recording is on the LPCA website, and that's landpark.org. Go to Land Use Committee, click on that, and there's a series of projects. The top project is general plan, and the top item on that is our positions that we've asked various neighborhood associations to consider vis-a-vis the proposals put forth by the city in the housing element. And there is also rationalizations for those recommendations for your discussions among yourself and with your boards. Tonight, we're going to start that discussion. There will not be a series of any kind of highly formulated proposals. There's going to be 2 or 3 positions that I'd like to introduce to you for your consideration. And then I'm going to follow up with, again, a brief, a land use brief regarding just commercial corridors and centers, which I'll post in a few days. It'll kind of be the discussion in written format, and it'll lead with the proposals for your consideration. I'm really glad to see a number of neighborhood associations represented here tonight, because the situation for the city is we have about 110 neighborhood associations. About half of them are active. Several are quite large, and most of those are, a lot of those are represented here. And it has become a situation where the city has not really been able to engage the neighborhood associations individually. So we've found over the last 3 years of getting ready for the general plan and discussing strategies with the city, that one of the best ways to do this is to collaborate with our neighbors in communities of interest. And that was formulated really and brought to the forefront this year with redistricting. We were able to really take a look at where are our common interests, and they tend to be one in trying to preserve and enhance our neighborhoods. Each one of them is relatively unique throughout the city. And one of the great advantages of Sacramento is it has a multiplicity of unique neighborhoods. And we kind of feel that we don't want to homogenize all of those. We think that's a great thing about the city. The second thing, besides preserve and enhance, is we have common needs to develop our community centers so that they service us and help turn our neighborhoods into walkable communities, sustainable communities, complete communities. And last of all, we have corridors, and these are our main streets. They are our cultural centers. They are our transportation hubs. They are the places that have our greatest degree of services. And whenever possible, we would like to intensify those, make them viable and vital. And that will be done probably through the plans that we're going to look at tonight. So tonight, I'd like to give you an example of several corridors throughout the city that have grown since the last time we've done a general plan update, which was 5 years ago, the 2035. It was a really excellent general plan. I'm going to show you some elements from it, and then I'm going to introduce you to some of the elements of the 2040 general plan as they are in draft format. We've been given just 3 elements that relate to city centers, community centers, and corridors. And those are a land use map and strategy, which means what goes where in the city, which differentiates a little bit from zoning, because that's how do you fit that thing, that building into the box or the lot next to the box or lot next door, which is zoning, height limits, setbacks, etc. And then the second thing they've given us is an element about zoning, which is mass, or the mass of buildings, which is kind of a way to think of all of zoning: height, setbacks, number of stories, lot coverage or open space on the lot. All these things go into the mass of the building and how it sits on its lot. So we're going to talk a little bit about their proposals for that tonight too. So without further ado, let me go ahead and do some screen sharing. If there's any difficulty with this, I want people to unmute and just pipe right up. I'm going to go ahead and do the screen because we are going to actually visit the city's website in a moment. Okay, so Bev, do you see what's happening on Broadway?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. All right, so everybody should be able to see that. If you can't, go ahead and pipe up and let me know. These corridors and centers are like our neighborhoods. They're a big aspect of our identity, and how they're managed, how they're preserved, how they're enhanced is really critical. They have a history that shows architectural, various architectural themes. These themes have been carried on through sort of generations of building. They're big, they're small, they're modest, and sometimes they get updated. And these simple buildings have a continuing life. And what is really beautiful about this is they not only maintain their character in the community, but they also preserve a low-cost entry point for new businesses. In almost all cases, if you are able to attend one of William Berg's, one of our guests tonight, preservation meetings, you'll find that existing buildings are not only cost effective, but they are also incredibly sustainable. They may not have the smallest ongoing footprint from a maintenance or an energy standpoint, but the building materials are already sunk expenditures, use of resources, and tearing them down and recycling and putting up new building materials generally makes new buildings not as sustainable nor nearly as affordable as existing. So nestled in between these buildings are good designed public spaces that I think we all understand how to enjoy. Small grocery stores make our neighborhoods walkable. In the preservation of our buildings, a lot of times they have a design for reuse. This is one of the great R Street buildings, an old theater that is now mixed use residential. This is a wonderful building on 16th Street, up across from Memorial Auditorium. It was our first conversion to lofts over commercial space below, several great restaurants there. And if you'll notice on top, there's an added story, but with significant setbacks, so that the whole mass and look and feel of the building was preserved. It's a really a great second use. There's a lot of great architecture in Sacramento, and this is just a remarkable example down in Oak Park. And we have now new development that is just really as exciting as some of the older development. Wonderful, groundbreaking architecture. This bow of a ship, if you will, with its flying bridge up above, it has all of the materials of its Oak Park environment, yet captured some of the spirit further up Broadway of the modern architecture in the Tower District. Up 16th Street, again, a wonderful example of a building 3 stories over 1 story commercial, again, mixed use, residential over commercial, that really looked to architectural details and materials. Here we have what is sort of known as clinker brick, a combination of brick, red and black brick, offset in a relaxed pattern that gives the front of the building wonderful texture. And these buildings, these new, a lot of these taller buildings that are 4 or 5 stories are the side streets, or the back of these buildings have a transition of scale between the commercial corridor and the residential neighborhoods that are represented on the back streets, the backside, and the side streets with things like townhouses. These wonderful little townhouses are in Oak Park. These on the way up to Poverty Ridge off 21st Street, wonderful townhouses. One of the fabulous examples here of great architecture is this, and great development really, is that this whole lot, this development, which is 1 square block, it's quite large, was graded below grade, so that you see the bottom story is stepped down. It's about 3 or 4 steps down, which makes the tops, the second story and the stairways up completely manageable. You know, just 6, 7 steps to get up into the front door. This is excellent design for people of all ages, and just a great product here. These small cluster homes are over in Curtis Village off Sutterville, and they're fantastic. These are the small cluster homes that are past, they're sort of deeper into the village, and there's some of the most successful transitions in scale and small lot development in the city. This is a typical house that right now is on Burnett Way. It's the first residential block off Broadway. It's a great little craftsman house. Burnett has a lot of these. And what's nice about this is this kind of home can nestle right in with this kind of townhouse. And both of them have a transition of scale that's really quite handsome. This is a larger duplex and land park, again, providing a transition of scale between the commercial corridor and the residential neighborhood. This is on Riverside Boulevard. It's one of the few that are not on a corner. So it was designed and approved by exception, and the fit was fantastic. This is a new building over in East Sac. It is, I think, on Folsom. And what they've done is gone right around to the back and built townhouses of a great Mediterranean design without too much ornamentation, not too much amenity, trying to get a good price point and make a contribution to affordability, even in East Sacramento. And can I say also, giving, as we talk about aging in place in our communities, a lot of the traditional neighborhoods have lots of landscaping that requires a lot of maintenance. And as people age, a lot of people want to have a new choice in housing, but want to stay in the neighborhood. So these small flats and townhouses are a wonderful housing choice. The communities are cared for by more than the buildings. Their public spaces out front really add to the character and complete the transitions with great details. This is even in the modern hardscaping of the Ice House on our street. These kind of things are both lights, downlighting for walking and preventing people from driving on wider parts of the sidewalk, which gets us right to the streets. How do we keep traffic moving as we work towards 2040, 20 years from now? It's hard to tell whether we will be able to replace the car and our growth over that 20-year period with alternative modes of transportation. But one way to keep the cars moving are these circles, and they can be lit at night like this one. They can be inconspicuous, or they can be part of the landscape as a noted part. The public spaces become also incredibly important for our sense of community. This is a wonderful use of various elements. One, traditional lighting elements. Secondly, the quarried stone planters, the benches and tables, the change in materials out in the street, and the nesting of parking areas, and then bulb outs for street crossings. This is just a great design, and the plantings adding to the urban tree canopy. When you put this all together and add a little pizzazz, art, lighting for nightscaping, murals, you end up with a true sense of community that is really what I think we're all looking for to enhance, preserve, and take forward over the next 20 years. So how do we envision, now that we've seen some examples, and much of this, the newer things that I've shown you have been done in the last 5 years. So when you think about a general plan, something that goes from the last one we did 5 years ago was for 2035. The one we're doing now is for 2040. A lot of people think, well, I'm not even going to be here then. So how much should I get involved? Well, I think you can see that almost all of the new things I showed you have been done in the last 5 years. And there is far more, which we'll continue to look at. So the general plan is important because nowadays things happen fast. I think we've all been surprised pre-COVID at how fast the city was growing and how fast our corridors were developing. So it's not 20 years out in the future. You'll see this take off as soon as the new general plan is set. It kind of gives the developers the go ahead to start building by whatever the new rules are. The general plan is the foundation of almost all the ordinances in the city of Sacramento. The city is divided into two halves: public works, which takes care of most of the streetscapes we just saw, which currently is working on the design of the Broadway Complete Streets corridor and what it'll look like with the elements that some of the example elements I just showed you. And the planning and design department, which is the department that stimulates and regulates private development in the city. So it lays the vision, if you will, the regulations and the stimulation to proceed with private capital to build in the city. Great cities are generally built by developers, but they are outlined and planned by great city planners. And their true livability, life quality, is really defined by the residents and contributed to by the residents. And that's really what I want to talk to you about tonight, how we can do that. So here's a good example of what we face when we are looking at the city of Sacramento and its corridor development plan. We have decisions to make, and the decisions we make will define whether our streets look like the one on the left or they look like the buildings on the right. That is determined by height, mass, setback from the street, materials, and design standards. So all of those things are going to roll out now in our general plan. They will propose to us their massing strategies and zoning strategies. We will respond with our ideas and our opinions, and hopefully we'll collaborate in a way that gets us marries our vision. So here are some of the decisions we have to make. And it is, I wanted to show you some examples of how some of these decisions manifest. These are new townhouses in South Park. And it's interesting. I recently saw townhouses, something like this, in a neighborhood in Denver, Colorado, with old houses around them. And the contrast actually worked on those. This is interesting. I think it's challenging to most people. And I think you just have to make up your mind whether you think this works or not. But it is the use of predominantly materials. And we're in a period right now where most architecture is highly dominated by material choice. That's where the new technologies are. That's where the newness is. And where in the past, a lot of times it's been in design, really, and how the building is, the lines of the building. So sometimes you have drastic contrasts between a new building and its surrounding community. And In some places, that contrast over time really works. It sets up a dynamic quality to the urban environment. In other places, it doesn't work so well. It's a gamble, but all that happened here was that a couple of things happened. This beautiful old building was retained in a city core. This is off 16th Street and O. And the preservation of that building is not holding back the development of the city. And in the city core, that development can be 8 stories tall. So the question is that we have to ask ourselves is should this building dominate? Should we allow that building? If we feel that their contrast is too great, which one of them goes? So what we do as a community is to try, and in working with an architect, is try and determine how this happens. And hopefully we're greatly dependent upon good architects, of which there are several in our community. This is a building in San Pablo. It's a wonderful building. This is a design of it. It's got inset large windows. It's got balconies. It's got a recessed top with a small walking patio around it. It's got clinker brick. It's got fun little shade, heavy duty shade awnings out the front of it. It's got beautiful, equally dominant architectural steel front windows down here on a pretty dynamic streetscape. And this is an affordable housing project that was designed by a developer that is part of the Methodist Church. Whenever I show this to you because the city right now is, and the state has declared a housing crisis. And the crisis is one of affordability. And so their idea is to build their way out of it. It's kind of a trickle-down theory that if they build enough, they'll flood the market and prices will come down. But the question is, build with what? And right now, the city doesn't quite have the vision that this building has, that you can build real quality as well as build affordability. Affordability is an interesting thing. It is set by the federal government, by HUD. They state what should be the cost of a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment in Northern California. They kind of set a limit. It's a little bit like the insurance industry for healthcare. They say this is a reasonable price to pay. You get in a hot market like Sacramento, and they might not pay that. They might not pay the average price, which might be higher. But that is then what allows the voucher program to take place and actually pay this developer what they think is a reasonable price. So the developer is not doing this for nothing, but based upon averages for the region, you might consider their profit is capped because the feds won't approve the voucher program for things that are too high. So this is a way of taking price out of the project. What it does is it caps the profit of the project. This building was proposed on Broadway at 21st Street on Broadway, across the street from the light rail. And it was by the same developer for the Methodist Church. Now, it's kind of interesting that in San Pablo, this was the design that was given San Pablo, and in Sacramento, by the same developer who is not looking for profit. This was the design that was given to Sacramento. Now, I think you can see that this is problematic. It feels more like our 1960s state office buildings than it does resident on a dynamic street, the street of Broadway, which at one time was considered the entertainment capital for the city. So we were given, how do we make changes to this? Well, the city notified us and introduced us to the developer. And we had 6 days to try and influence this project as a community organization. 3 of those took place in just getting a meeting together. And then we met with the developer and had a conversation over the phone with the architect. And this was the next design that we got. And we had only 5 working days to influence this project. This is another project on Broadway. It's got an equally interesting story. Originally, this building was 1 more story tall. It was 6 stories tall. It was brick all the way up. It was a flat front. It reminded me of many of the buildings that I was familiar with in New York City, down in Soho, flat front industrial building that had been converted to residential. We had the ability to work with the developer and get the setback, get this, the brick part, the same height as all of the existing brick buildings in this part of Broadway, leading down to an historic block, which is the 1700 block, has a number of historical buildings on it, and then get a recessed kind of upper stories here. They brought in some of the elements that were from the Tower records to try and bring in a little bit of history, and then brought in second story dining, etc. We're still in conversation on this project because at this point, we had final changes that we wish to make to this. One of the problems we thought about was that it looks a little bit like a stage production of Rent from Broadway. There's people all over the building and a lot of people here, and this is a very busy intersection. And we thought it created a little bit too much of a distraction. And so we had some ideas on how to help that out. Also, you're going to see that this is the face of the building as it faces the Tower Theater. And you see that it starts as a 3-story building over here at the end, goes to 4 and then to 5 stories as it wraps around the front. That's nice. This is part of zoning a big, massive building like this. And you are allowed to, if I can, have a building of greater mass on major corners in the city. So this is about as massive as you'll get in the Broadway corridor, but it is on a major corner and it is across from the Tower Theater. So that helps justify its mass in the minds of the city planners. And then the step downs over here help make the transition to the residential community. The question is it enough? You know, so here you have the mass of the building shown next to the mass and the height of the Tower Theater, and the distances are accurate. So as you can see, it seems appropriate scale, but what's the problem is it's not really viewed this way. The sight lines of the building are quite a bit different. And when you're on the street level, up here walking down Broadway, you can't see the Tower Theater. It's pretty much obscured by the building, because as you get closer to the building, your sight lines can't carry that angle. So, this is the difficulty with looking at plans, but I assume that everybody that's here is here because they'd like to have an input to plans. So that's why I'm showing you how to look at these drawings and where the shortcomings are of what's being presented to you as a drawing. Let's see if we can get in one more view of this. Not sure. Now let's do this first. This mass right here is a low wall, and it represents a single-story house. Here you'll see a two-story house. There is a gap of 20 feet. So the people that live here with their backyard are looking at this wall here, and then this wall, and then this wall from their vantage point in their backyard. And what we tried to persuade the architect to do was to make a compromise where we eliminated this floor right here. It was not essential for their rental. We took this floor and wrapped it around the building, eliminating a little mass here. And then we allowed for and said we would consider what would be considered an apartment tower here, and that make that transition a little bit easier. As of yet, that's not been continued in the discussion because it doesn't have to be. In the first changes we made to this project to get it where it is now, it was because we were under the old community review rules. We're currently under ministerial review, which means it gets reviewed by a single staff member who checks off all the boxes as to whether it meets the zoning and land use codes, as well as a few integrations into the street and traffic and safety issues, et cetera. But fundamentally, it's a check the box approach, and the community gets no say in ministerial approval. There is no community review, and there is pretty much no challenge to a director or to a higher level. So this was the first building in the city to get dropped. The permit was pulled and then resubmitted under the ministerial approval, which stopped the conversation with the community. Right now, we're trying to re-engage the developer with the proposal that we have some better ideas, and that those better ideas will lead to community ownership and use of this building and have it fit better. This is the Nightscape, which we asked for. You can tell right now, if you remember going to your most recent stay at a hotel, this is not unlike outdoor lighting for a hotel. You don't necessarily want to be up in this room right here with these lights shining up on the wall, illuminating it. This was given to us, I think, as a courtesy, because the city asked them to give us an illumination plan. I wouldn't call this I don't believe that they're going to light the building this way, but I want you to know the reality of the difficulty of interacting with the development community and the city. They do recognize that they do want community ownership. They do want community business, but the architect wants to design his own building, and the developer has his own vision. So they're not, they'll listen to a certain degree, but you have to come at them with some pretty good ideas. So we'll see what we can do about this lighting plan. This is a building that got approved. It is on the corner of 19th Street. It is what I would call, again, the problem with something like this is architects can develop these drawings so quick with computer aid that they can get submitted very quickly, and they can go through the review process very quickly. What we're working with now with a very cooperative developer is to get this corner redesigned so it is a major entryway for a major restaurant down here, and to increase the public space out in front of this, because it's right across from Light Rail diagonally, and it also has a great view of the Tower Theater. It's on the north side, and we think it is a wonderful piece of property, and we would like the developer to maximize its use, and especially the public space. So we want a good restaurant in here. We want outdoor dining. We want more public space here. And which brings us to this idea right here. This is what we've envisioned and what we're suggesting for in front of that building. And what they do is with this large bulb out, they then cut back in here and recover their parking spaces in front right here. But it's an oversized bulb out that makes this a plaza. It brings opportunity for tables in here, and over here you can see the small awnings of umbrellas, etc. So this, in this case, the streetscape is the dominant theme that we're working on to actually anchor the community concepts there. What's behind these big buildings? What are the transitions? So we looked at several townhouses as transitions. These townhouses are in Curtis Village. They have what you would call a greater degree of difficulty. The reason for this is, unlike the other townhouses we saw, this developer would not grade down the grading here. So he's on flat grading. So you can see he's got, 12 steps going up, long steps to get up there. In this case, you wonder, what is this, a half basement on this thing? There's certain odd elements to this. They're very tall. I think that the townhouses were a great idea for here. I don't think these are completely successful. These are cluster homes that join those townhouses. They're behind the townhouses. And we're talking about a transition from a large Safeway commercial development transitioning to Curtis Park. Cluster housing are also a great transition. Again, this developer scaled these up to get maximum value, sales value. There's no land, there's no yards. These are the back right here of the townhouses. So the transition from these large townhouses to these large houses to the small houses of Curtis Park, they do provide a transition, but here it is. Here's what you're looking at. It's pretty massive. I do think that the whole idea that went behind this transition was excellent. It just happens to really start to work way up here with these smaller cluster homes that were developed up there. And by the way, there are a lot of elements to the Curtis Village, which are good elements. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but what I am going to suggest is that our next meeting is going to be one which I hope will get to be hosted by Sierra Curtis, that can tell us about what it took to develop Curtis Village from a community standpoint. It was a huge project. It's an ongoing project. It takes a lot of hours of volunteers to be able to help and input and manage a project like this so that it works for the community. This project here didn't really have a community input. This is the mill over at the west end of Broadway. And its desire here, the goal was to build first-time owner affordable units. And they've done it by minimizing the land cost, going 3 stories, having no lot coverage restrictions. There's fundamentally no open space to these. The only open space they have are to these small sort of rooftop patios. But it is popular. It has sold out, and a lot of young urban millennials are in there with starting families, and they're happy to be in home ownership, have that housing security that they wouldn't get if they were in the rental market. This is another part of the mill, and it's not quite as exciting. These are the rental apartments that would be occupied if those millennials weren't able to buy one of those houses. So maybe they made the right move. It's going to, all those houses are right here, and those apartment buildings are going to take up all of this space in here. There will be, I believe, 12 of these. This is the sort of thing you want to be able to influence, but sometimes things go faster. The mill was, and this development was very fast. Comments on this are very limited. This again is ministerial. It's not ministerial approved. This was done as part of the specific plan for the mill. And that's why whenever you do have a specific plan for an area, you have to be involved. You can't just say, okay, I trust the developer that's here that's building the part that is going to be owned, because then you can have a huge rental area here that you may not be happy with. This is again a sort of abandoned development. This is over on 65th Street. This is brand new construction. It is aimed at, again, the plan for it is student housing for Sac State. This is for married couples, etc., to be able to live near Sac State. Another problem, but an interesting one, is this is near Safeway in Midtown, is the speed of construction. This development right here, which adjoins Safeway to the right, which is just off the screen, is great mixed use over commercial. And this building, I don't know if you have gone by it or not, but it went up near instantly. It only took about 3 weeks to build the top of that. That's because it's a style of construction that's just been approved in the building standard, which is wood frame up to 5 stories over a concrete base. And wood frame goes up very, very quickly. So sometimes you just, things just move too fast for you to comment on, or you don't realize that just by the framing of this building, you get a certain style of building. All of these buildings are the same construction. It is, when you see them one at a time, you just kind of say, oh, okay, well, it's affordable. It's built out of wood. It's not steel, et cetera. It's not too tall. It'll help solve the affordable housing crisis. But when you talk about corridor after corridor after corridor, you do not want your corridors to sort of look like this, have this look and feel. Last of all, is I wanted to show you the problems of when zoning and land use are sort of abandoned. This is San Clemente, you know, an oceanside area, wonderful town. Was originally sort of a small house town. Then it became very wealthy, very expensive, full of houses just like this. And then they eliminated zoning. They just tossed out zoning. They didn't think they needed it anymore because it was totally developed into these small houses. It was sort of like Land Park or Curtis Park or East Sacramento. Who would ever do anything to it because the land was expensive, etc. But this is what happened to it. It went into these anywhere, well, multi-family, some rentals, some condos, etc., where they kind of squeaked in, putting cars right in front here and here, or little squeak in driveways back in here, or here where they park underneath in the first few and live up above. Everything is, they made do. They kept the cars and they made do. And they bought the land for a lot of money and they put a lot of money into the development. So it can happen when you just sort of abandon zoning and you think, well, we're already built out. What does it mean to start to envision your corridor? Now, these are wonderful sketches of our street, and it shows over here a series of older buildings in our street. It shows the big office building and a parking lot that exists on 16th Street, and a vision of 4-story buildings across the street. It has a sort of Art Crumb reality to it, the birds, the existing telephone poles, and kind of shows you the organic liveliness of it and the size as it is matched to cars and autos. Again, our street, I'm sure you'll recognize it. It actually were the initial drawings for visualizing our street. And it's remarkable how true these drawings are to how it exists today. I think you can appreciate that this is a much better way to work with an architect than computer design. It gives you the feeling that anything's possible. It engages your imagination. I would highly recommend that as you get involved in these things, that you stay in the sketch stage as long as you possibly can. Here is a completely designed exterior building with all the tricks. I mean, great corner doorways, sort of large columns that anchor it, great windows, terrace setbacks. These are called up here Juliet balconies, where people can sit or walk back near their setback. Overhangs, good relief, and looking down, and this is a large building, and it's looking down as buildings get sort of smaller and go down on a prominent corridor with a big open space and things here. Now, this was the proposed loft for 19th Street, where I just showed you the building where we were talking about getting this redesigned in the front. Why didn't this building get built? Well, there's lots of reasons it didn't get done. Things don't get built, but the important thing I wanted you to know is this is part of the 2012 Broadway vision plan, something that the community got deeply involved in, and then it got put on the shelf. So there was about 2 years worth of work in this, and the current, I don't know, was the current administration or the last administration, but politics changed, and this Broadway plan was just shelved. So this does happen. It is a wonderful process to envision anyway, and but that can happen. What you need to do is, whenever possible, is link any change in politics to commitments of how this is going to play out in your community. Sierra Curtis, Land Park, South Park, all the way over to Poverty Ridge and Newton Booth, all were deeply invested in this. And we should have had the political will to carry it forward. All right, I'm going to stop for a moment and ask if there are any questions, because now I'm going to get into just the language, a little bit of the language and examples of the details of planning, how they manifest themselves in these new general plan strategies, ordinances, etc. So let's just take a break for a moment, and let me ask, are there any questions so far?
There's a few that are up here, Kirk, and I'll read you the ones. There were some that were just comments.
Okay.
Go back to those, but because there were quite, well, I'll just say first, there was a question about, like, one of the examples you gave that was just flat, but it did get redesigned, and somebody pointed out not enough setbacks and trees needed for walkability, capturing pollution, shaded streets and sidewalks, bringing temperature down. Otherwise, they are creating a huge heat sink, heat island. And that was just a comment relating to those big looming style buildings with none of these amenities that are shown on this.
That's great. So what they brought in was the environmental sustainability aspect of design. Wonderful, wonderful thing to, great comment. Thank you very much. What's next?
RNZ Harrison, what about the cute little bungalows on Burnett Way directly behind this development? But I don't have the picture they were looking at, so I'm not sure which development.
Yes, I did show one of the bungalows on the Burnett Way. They are wonderful, and they do need to be maintained, and they can get integrated with small townhouses, small duplexes. There are also duplexes on Burnett Way that are quite handsome. Burnett Way is a wonderful street. It just happens to back up onto a commercial corridor that is going to get developed. It is going to get intensified. It does probably need to. It's an underutilized asset. I think we can all agree from a city standpoint, it's underutilized from a opportunity zone for development. But one of the things we have been able to do is so far limit the city's height and mass adjacent to Burnett Way. And in particular, over in the Tower District from 16th to 18th to 19th Street, which includes some historic buildings. And we're going to continue to work on that. So try and limit the imposition of the mass of that building on in the Tower District on the Burnett cottages.
So the next, Andrea Rosen, a couple people responded, so I'll just let you know the whole list.
Spit it out.
Why is seeing the Tower Theater from any nearby spot on Broadway good design criteria? I don't agree with that as a metric. It's not the state capitol, it's a movie theater. And someone responded, it's iconic, historic buildings gives it character. And then what's your comment? I guess.
Yeah, I think that those are the two arguments. One is, do we have to? And why should it restrict my right as a developer to design the building that I think activates that corner and makes a contribution to the community? And the second question is, because it's an historic building, it's a recognized iconic building for that sort of is an iconic representation of the community. So it's the answer to that question really is up to the community. It's the one place where really you ask the community to pipe in. If a particular location is iconic for the community. The community should speak up and make their feelings known. And it's not a design standard, I would say to Andrea, because it will not be implemented into the city's design standards. However, it may be implemented into the historic preservation standards to maintain certain sight lines. But that's really where the rubber meets the road on community involvement. Good questions, good comments. What else do we have?
Many of the designs look like they spring from a single idea. How do you think they will look in 20 years?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The single idea that some of the modern buildings look like is a flat front that is has a variety of what you would call setbacks to it, different facial planes, and on each one of the facial planes, the material changes. So we're looking at buildings that just have staggered faces with different materials, no particular ornamentation to these buildings. A lot of times use of a primary color as well. How that will stand the test of time versus some of the buildings that I showed you in the beginning, the brick buildings, et cetera, that have been around for 100 years are really worth repurposing. You know, I think you can tell what stands the test of time by what's saved. And a lot of those buildings are saved and then repurposed. Whether the newer buildings are that I showed you, time will tell whether they're repurposed or not.
So someone commented, among other things, that they have a cookie cutter aspect, and it brought to mind the image that came to mind for me is those East German buildings that were developed after the war, where everything had to be very quickly slapped up, and I don't think.
Well, this is a good comment. This is a good comment because right now, the problem with the city right now, and it's the problem with the state, is they're trying to address a housing crisis by, build, baby build. I mean, build as fast as you can and as much as you can. And the question is affordability and sort of a supply side strategy the two strategies that are so dominant that they replace community preservation enhancement. So that's the question, and that's the balance, and that's why we need to maintain a role for the community players, for everybody to hear. And right now, the state allocates growth. It demands growth. It has, in many cases, usurped municipal powers to determine our own land use, our own density, and our own zoning and massing. They're usurping those and imposing them on cities. Many cities are pushing back incredibly. Others are capitulating or, let's say, collaborating, not necessarily capitulating. I would call Sacramento in the collaborating category. They are collaborating. They believe that density, rapid building, saving time, let's get it up, let's get people housed, almost no matter what is important. They are making the promise that if we approve their high density corridor plans, that they will then give us the zoning powers to describe what those buildings look like. The only problem with that is that the state is usurping their zoning authorities. And we, as we read the state housing plans and the city's housing plans, believe that the city no longer has the power to protect and enhance communities unless they push back on the state's take of zoning authority. The city, on its part, has streamlined permitting. It's eased land use requirements. It has, and I'm going to show that to you in a minute, it's waived fees, impact fees, and it's reduced citizens' participation. So it's definitely in the collaborating category. Let's continue.
Oh, hold on, there are a couple more.
Okay.
How is the city and the developers plan for the potential of a massive shift to electric vehicles in 2040? Like, and in addition to that, for someone else is where the charging stations need space there for
Yes.
doing that.
Okay. That's a good question. And I'm going to address that in two ways. One is, it's true. Where do these things get charged? In a residential community, they get charged at home, and there has to be off-street parking to charge them. In a commercial and multifamily or mixed use corridor, again, they'll get charged where there's parking. So this is a big difficulty that the city is trying to address. They have a goal to decouple the parking costs from the buildings. So what they don't want is they don't want you to have to pay for a parking space if you don't own a car. So ideally, they want to move to an urban model of apartments, condominiums, etc., townhouses that don't have parking. You park in a parking garage, and the parking garage has charging. Now, they know that they can't get all the way there. So right now, most of the mixed-use development, most of this residential over commercial has parking requirements. However, they are being reduced. I'm not going to say eliminated, but they're also being studied as to how far they actually practically can be reduced and still make the move to sustainability through electrification of the automobile. It's a difficult situation that seems to be self-contradictory. They're studying it. What's next?
That's it for right now.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for those comments and questions. They were great. Let's see where we can continue on here. Okay, we have about 6:30. All right, another 15 or 20 minutes. So let's go quickly here. What I wanted to show you here is fundamental transition to scale urban planning. We've got a large multi-story building here, typically 3-4 stories over one, commercial. Right behind it, they say smaller residential, step down transitional housing. This is like those row houses that we were talking about or seeing in Curtis Village. And then it drops down to the existing neighborhood here. So this is transition of scale. It also goes into landscape and streetscape, but on massing, that's what that represents. Density. What does density look like? I just want to, I'm giving these to you because I want to tune your eye to what things look like. This is county, right? Rural county. This is traditional neighborhood and suburban neighborhood, 6 to 8 units per acre. This is 12 to 18 units per acre. Somewhere in between these two is the sweet spot that the city is trying to achieve. They would like to achieve 8 to 12 units in most of our neighborhoods. You have to realize when you drive around Sacramento that there is there's some of this, there's a lot of this, and there's a fair amount of this as the closer you get to downtown. So what they're really trying to do is they want to capitalize on lots that are out off Watt Avenue that have 8 to 12 fruit trees in the backyard. Here, they want to capitalize if they can and get ADUs in here. So here you see ADUs in with 2-story buildings and possibly duplex 2 stories on the corners and in some cases mid block. So this is where we're heading, and this is what you hear about in the state plans, SB9 and SB9. SB9 is duplexes anywhere, not just on the corners. And combined with the state ADU or additional dwelling units, produce this 12 to 18 units per acre. Of course, not every block will look like this, won't participate to this degree. So they're hoping that it'll land in the 8 to 12 unit category. There is another element along called the SB10, which allows for 10 unit multifamily housing. And it starts to look more like this when you implement SB10. The city has already stated that it is not going to implement SB10 until they see how SB9 and the ADUs manifest in the community. But it's not saying that it won't. It's just saying that this is their idea of gradual increase in density, is embracing SB9 and the ADUs and holding off on, but leaving the potential for SB10 or up to 10 units. What the key is to making this work and maintain, preserve the character of our neighborhoods are going to be height, mass, and setback. I think everybody has already heard of the problems of the 3-story ADU that's built right here on somebody's back property line, looking down into 3 of their neighbors' backyards. It's possible. It is zoned appropriately. I think you'll find that neighborhoods and community involvement will request a modification to the ADU plan to have 3-story, 35-foot ADUs allowed only when they're on an alleyway back here, separating lots. So, or possibly on a side street where it's looking out onto the side street. This again is an example of transition of scale, large building, townhouses, ADUs, and residential. Transition of scale. This is right in our existing general plan. It is what I am advocating and what the Land Use Committee is advocating for the consideration of the various neighborhood associations is not to allow triplexes and quads throughout residential neighborhoods, but instead allow for neighborhood planning, or at least through a zoning strip that allows for any lot adjacent to mixed use zoned lot, any adjacent to be zoned for triplexes, quads, 3-story townhouses, etc. in this zone right here. This is what we were looking at in that example across from the Tower Theater. Here's a 35-foot cube which is, so to speak, the building envelope for a residential lot. Now, it's never like this because it's allowed to be 35 feet tall, but it has only a 50% lot coverage allowance. So it would be up here. This would be the building envelope, not this big cube. And you can see here a human being. So you can see really what happens when you have a 20-foot setback between this commercial building and this, let's say, 3-story ADU here. Well, it's fairly comparable to look into this 45-foot building, but not for a house, because the house is 2-story with a peaked roof here. And in particular, if there's a smaller ADU here, it's looking at this massive wall here. Thus the question that was posed by one of us, what about the cottages on Burnett Way, looking at the back of this project? So one of the things we've done is we've asked for 2 stories on the south side in the Tower District, 45 feet or 3 stories on the north side, and 55 feet or 4 stories on X Street throughout the Tower District of Broadway. They've come back and suggested 3 stories here on the south side, 4 stories or 5 stories and above on the north side. So this is still under discussion. However, they at least differentiated the 2 in their plan. FAR, this is the last sort of technical thing I wanted to show you. It's really the language the city uses, and I'm going to show that to you on the city's proposal on the next slide. And what it means is that this is floor area ratio. This is 1, where the floor of the building covers 100% of the area of the lot. That's an FAR1. This is an FAR1. They took 25% and left it for open space and put it on the 2nd story. It's still 1. This is 1. They wanted 75% open space and built a 4-story high building. So just because it says FAR1 doesn't mean it's going to be a 1-story building. It could be a stair-step building. It could be a 4-story building. Here's FAR2. Here's a very typical, good-looking mass of stair-stepped commercial building at 4 floors. Here's a straight 4-floor with a large open area next to it. So this is the nature of how to look at FAR. It can be much taller than the designation implies. Now, this is how the city wants to designate zoning in the future. Wants to do it by a single number and allow the designer the ultimate freedom to build the building the way he wants. The only problem, that you have is when this decides to move to this corner and this is what's next to it. 4-story building looking down into this private area here. So privacy usually is what is sacrificed when you go to FAR. The second thing that can get sacrificed is on-street parking, because they want to eliminate the density numbers here and just give you the mass of the building. And they will fit, developers will fit as many people as they can into these buildings. This is very much like the building that I just showed you across from the Tower Theater. And the 2-bedroom apartments in there are 750 square feet. The 1-bedroom studios are 400 square feet. And this is because to be affordable in this market to the millennials, et cetera, that work downtown, what they have to give up is square footage. So what's lost when you go to FAR and eliminate density is generally you eliminate square footage of the units. Secondly, if there's cars, there are more cars out on the streets because there can be a lot more units in here they can't accommodate than they can accommodate in parking. The last thing they give up is privacy. That's when you go to FAR. So general plan, I'm asking you to get involved in the general plan. The general plan does not mean that this is what the city is going to look like in 2040. It's highly likely that much of the city will look as we reach these decisions with the city and pass this general plan by the end of this year. Within 5 years, it will start to affect the look and feel of the city. There is public outreach, which is insufficient. We have to create our own public input. Otherwise, they will reduce this to a workshop and us putting some stickies on the board and answering a few questions. There's a land use, which is what I'm asking you to get involved with and join your neighborhood association. And those that are interested in what I showed you tonight, take over the aspect of land use and discussions and learn about this by collaborating with your other land use counterparts in the neighborhood associations. All of the neighborhood associations I mentioned tonight, as well as Southland Park and many of them in our district, collaborate with land use meetings between the neighborhood associations. Other areas are environmental and social justice, mobility, and age-friendly design. Every neighborhood association should have somebody that's interested in each one of these things, and if possible, be a member of the siloed organizations that are at the table with the city. The city cannot deal with 110 neighborhood associations. So instead, on land use and housing, they deal with land use and housing advocacy groups, SAC, Housing Alliance, et cetera. So we not only collaborate with each other, but whenever possible, we get one of us in the collaborative group to be a member of the siloed interest groups. Same goes for environmental justice and mobility. Again, we're talking about enhancing the community character and increasing housing diversity and, whenever possible, ownership. This is, I guess, last of all, I wanted to show you just two maps to show you where the rubber meets the road, and then we'll close the meeting. So if you give me 5 more minutes, I'd appreciate it. I know we've just reached our time limit. This right here is a very interesting map. This is the map of where ministerial design takes place in sort of intensified areas, growth areas of the city. So all of this green is where whatever's on the books as a design standard, as a zoning standard, as a land use standard, if the building meets checks off all the boxes, the citizens in the community have very little input. So you can see it's all of the city, what's called the central. This is the central city. This, I can't remember exactly what they call it now, but Central City Specific Plan, maybe. They did a very interesting thing, you'll notice. They captured Broadway. Broadway was an abandoned asset 5 years ago. And so the community took over and did the Broadway plan in 2012. And then the city came back and said, no, we want it. and they took it and they put it within the boundaries of the Central City specific plan, Broadway. And that's why now, when you will look at the general plan, Broadway will not be in the planning unit of Greater Land Park, which is here. So it belongs in the Central City because it wants Broadway to play by the Central City rules. These are all the ministerial approval areas too. This is why we need to be involved at the front end, designing that check the box system. Interesting areas. This is Curtis Village. It has its own specific plan. And this over here is the mill with its own specific plan. And this over here is Sutter Park with its own specific plan. And I'm hoping that the next meeting we will have these two organizations that developed these two to tell us what that experience was like in dealing with the city on specific plans, because we have our own community centers that we need to develop all over the city besides here. These are the big ones, but this whole area right here from Taylor's down to the college needs to have a vision for it. The Tower District here needs a vision. And this part of Sutterville here at the entrance to the park is very underutilized. It needs a vision. And last of all, this part of Sutterville here needs its own vision. And what the city has agreed to do on the corridors is develop corridor vision plans. The only problem is currently they're scheduled for between 2024 and 2028. And by then, the cat will be out of the bag. So we're trying to accelerate that. Now, this is what I wanted to show you right here. And you'll see that Broadway is gone. This is the Greater Land Park general plan area. This is what we will be working on when the city comes to us with their draft plan. Right now, their plan is to increase the densification in the neighborhoods by allowing up to quads, triplexes and quads. And the state has already mandated in these areas two ADUs and duplexes on any lot and a lot split on any lot, which means up to 4 units on any lot in here. And that's by state mandate. So our position right now is that's plenty of density. There is a second state bill that says since this is a housing crisis, they've mandated that once you increase the density of a land use designation, you cannot go back. So our efforts, our recommendations is that we proceed in steps right now. And so we do agree with Greg Sullivan, head of planning, that they should only implement SB 9 and the ADUs. And it was interesting because that's what he said. We're going to implement those two things and then look at SB 10. He did not mention triplexes or quads, which are in the city plan. But right now we feel that the state plan is enough of a first step. The second plan the city has for over 85% of its growth are in these pink areas on the corridors. And as you can see, lower Freeport, very intensified. This area of Sutterville, very intensified, very deep here, directly across from Curtis Village. And if you looked at Broadway, it would show very densified, these darker colors, like this to this here, this range, all up and down Broadway. And but it is showing lighter colors adjacent on the south side in here. What we're looking at here is FAR, as we were saying. It doesn't say any more density. It says how massive are these buildings. Right here, the mass of these buildings is pretty extreme. These buildings are FAR 6. They could easily be 8 stories right here. This buildings right here are FAR 5, and these right here are FAR 4. This is FAR 5, FAR 4. So they're proposing to allow up to 4 and 5 story buildings in these areas. This right in here, these are FAR 2 right here, this lighter color, FAR 2, in this above, FAR 4, FAR 2, FAR 4, FAR 4, FAR 4, FAR 2. So these buildings are anywhere from 2 to 4 stories tall, and these buildings are 4 to 6 stories tall here, possibly here. So we need to be involved. This is remarkable development here. This is known as an opportunity zone. It's big acreage. Everybody down here has fruit trees. This is North City Farms. And looks to me like it's slated for quite a bit of high density development here in North City Farms. And I don't even know if there's an active community association here. But this is something that we're going to try and contact people down here and just make sure that they're aware of this plan when it gets brought forward. I wanted to show that there is no plans for much of a development in the pocket and in Southland Park in this area here. And so our D7 group really is most active up in the north end. And there was someone asked the question about parking and whether parking was going to be eliminated or not. This is a TOD, transportation-oriented design ordinance. It shows the centers for light rail here behind City College, up here near Taylor's, and a 1/4 mile radius and a 1/2 mile radius. Everything within the 1/2 mile radius is supposed to have no parking required at all. So it's hard to say what'll happen in the development here and what will happen to off-street parking for cars. This was Sierra Curtis and Curtis Park Neighborhood Association was actually smart to do a specific plan in here and negotiate how that was going to work out. Because right now here,
Kurt,
yeah.
Andrea stated that the Crocker Village is not a specific plan. It's a planned unit development. It was unique in that it was also a state declared hazardous substance cleanup area and was subject to state cleanup requirements.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. And I hope that we can learn from your experience there in an exchange in the near future. I just wanted you to see densities already. This is Burnett Way right here. And this is the south side of Broadway. This is the mill. These are the projects here. This is North City Farms. And you can see why the city is looking at this as an opportunity area. How are those plans driven? This is the Central City Plan. This is called the Land Park Plan, the Pocket Plan, the South Area Plan. So that's the planning area. So therefore, we did propose this as our new district for our representative, because our only authority is with our commissioner, city councilman, and our planning design commissioner. So we have two people that we target who can be our voice and our vote, those two. And we wanted this to be the same as our planning area. So we included Broadway, we included Newton Booth and South Park, so that we had both sides of Broadway. We included both sides of Freeport, both sides of Sutterville. We submitted a second map that extended into Oak Park because of the history, the Sierra Curtis and Oak Park. And this was the existing plan where they separated Freeport, and we had to get the agreement of the support of two council people for changes we wanted to make. And this is what we ended up with, of kind of a strange plan. We lost part of Upper Land Park. We gained Sierra Curtis, our friends to the east, into the same district. We unified Southland Park and joined the pocket, when what we actually really wanted was this zone right in here. So we're back to having to really collaborate and work with two other commissioners and council members. That's our goal, and what we have to do now is convince them. I think that's enough. This other stuff is just kind of let me go ahead and close this and just take any questions from anybody who wants to stay on.
So I will go through the stuff that's on here. And then if
And
people have
I think-
questions, they can just speak up, but.
Right, we can just raise hands and speak up.
Right. So some people signed off with thanks. Too many ADUs are being used as short-term rentals, Airbnbs, which defeats the purpose of the state ADU laws. Trees get cut down to build ADUs, and since they are approved ministerially, an appeal of a tree removal is futile. And someone else commented that SB 10 allows 10 units plus 4 ADUs.
It's absolutely correct. And thank you. It's bad enough at 10, but yes, it's 10 plus 4 right at the moment.
Yeah.
And that could be changed if it was adopted, but we'll just cross that bridge when it comes to it. Thank you.
SB 9 is not only duplexes per lot, it's also 2 homes per lot. Very nice neighborhoods in LA filled with 2 homes per lot. Eagle Rock, Highland Park, it's very residential way of increasing housing density.
Yep, true.
Great city planning when the city is hoping to get 8 to 12 units per acre. SB 9 has taken away the ability to act. Just a hope. So another one is ministerial review being used to work around environmental impact, climate impact of losing tree canopy?
Great question, great question. Yes, ministerial design fundamentally short circuits CEQA. However, we can work towards getting tree canopy, since it's part of the general plan of sustainability. Tree canopy and preservation should be part of the boxes that are checked in ministerial review, rather than having permitting of another housing unit be an automatic approval for tree removal. So yes, absolutely, something we need to work on.
Well, that might help with the Airbnb workaround by adding, if they're building an ADU, taking down trees to add an ADU and then using it for Airbnbs.
Well,
Like, there may
right
be other
now,
recourse as
right.
well for that, but
Yes.
still,
right, Bev. And I'm not up on the recent, I have heard that there's been some recent adjustments to allow short-term rental of the duplexes in SB9 and ADUs. And yet when it was brought to us for our support, they told us that they were not going to allow short-term rentals. And we gave our conditional support that they not allow short-term rentals. So I'm not quite sure how this got flipped, this situation got flipped. And frankly, I don't even know about it. So I can't address it yet, but get involved and we'll figure that out and let everybody know.
I just think we should get all the keys.
Anybody want to raise their hand, just raise their hand and we'll have a discussion.
Eric,
Oh, Eric. Yeah, go ahead and unmute.
unmute.
Hello, and I apologize if I missed if you mentioned the answers to this before, but I'm gonna backtrack to, you said you met with the architect who did that building in, was it San Pablo?
Yes.
And then-
I didn't meet with the architect on that building. I met with the developer of that building.
Or the developer, yeah, so I was kind of curious, you kind of pointed out the difference between the design of that building and the type of same old over and over design we seem to be getting in Sacramento. Was there an answer to that from the developer by chance?
You know, to tell you the truth, you have to work with what you're given. And we were given that first design, that state office building style of design. And so we felt good about within a 5-day period getting as much changes to that as we did. We also got a floor eliminated off of it. It was a 6-story building. We got it down to a 5 with a setback on the top, which is a big deal. Frankly, I haven't had that discussion with him yet as to really how San Pablo got, a brick building, et cetera. That was pretty nice design.
Yeah,
But yeah, he's not going away. Matter of fact, he just got a $29 million grant for that building that we were working on. So we'll get to know him better and we'll get that answer.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thanks.
I can't see if there are hands raised only because I can't see most of
I
them.
have my hand raised.
Okay, thank you.
And what I wanted to tell you is I had an extensive email convo with the planners about ADUs and short-term rentals. And the type of ministerial review allowed in the ADU law limited, did not allow rentals less than 30 days. But what the planners told us is and I share it with some people and I can share it with you, is because I was confused. I said, SB9, the ADU laws don't allow them. They said, oh, we made all these, we wanted to have other ADU types. So we made our ordinance. We have all these other ADU types that are also reviewed ministerially, and they can be short-term rentals. So hardly anybody uses that ADU law version that's in our ordinance. They pick one of these other more flexible options.
Oh, thank you, Francesca.
Now,
Good.
SB9 does not allow short-term rentals, and it doesn't allow cities any flexibility to allow them in SB9. But again, they're not doing very good at limiting any of the short-term rentals. We have whole houses in my neighborhood that aren't the primary residence. We're having the city look into that right now. People are just fixing houses, buying them. Somebody will see a house being fixed up and they'll say, oh, my daughter's interested in living in my neighborhood. What's going to happen with this house? Oh, I'm making it into an ADU. And making it into an Airbnb, the whole house.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think you bring up a good point, and that's that there's always two boxes, two hands shells to cover the P in the shell game. One is the ministerial approval box, and it has certain rules. The second is the city's planning and design review path, where you have to actually submit and get reviewed. And we get a chance then to pipe in, thank you, Eric. We get a chance to pipe in on the planning and design review, but they can allow more things under that. So that's what you're bringing up, I think.
Yeah, that's
Jessica.
exactly what they did. And I was confused. I was saying, well, these shouldn't be allowed to be short-term rentals. And then the two different planners explained to me, I got bounced to Garrett Norman. I was hoping not to have to bother him. He's the ADU guru. And he explained it all very well.
That's
and I went back
sad.
and forth with him. And I put in my 2 cents of input, which I've done with him before politely, because we have a real polite relationship, because he always answers my questions in detail. But I told him that the state ADU law was made because of a supposed housing crisis that was a matter of statewide concern. So this seems to go against the spirit of the ADU law itself to allow them to be short-term rentals. And I'm especially concerned because the more you build on these residential lots, the more trees get taken down. And right now, I know Trees for Sac has tried to appeal some of these, and it's futile. I mean, you've given somebody a right ministerially to build. What are you going to say? I've given you a zoning right to build. You can't cut down the tree. Those two things don't compute.
Yep.
So I'm gonna, Jennifer had to leave, but she left a message, Jennifer Holden from Mangum Park.
Oh, great.
On March 21st at 6 p.m., sorry, it was printed a little wrong. March 21st at 6 p.m., Mangum Park Neighborhood Association meeting will include transportation planner Andrew Hart to hear his update on the Freeport transportation plan. If you would like to attend and haven't already received the meeting link, it can be found on the Mangum Park Neighborhood Association Facebook page or email. Mangum Park.
Beverly, do you have the ability to just send that out in a short note to all the attendees? That's very important.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because
I can do that. I'll have to pick up on new folks.
if you can't, let me know.
Okay.
Great. And as I was saying, land use is one element of corridor development. Transportation is the other half, or let's say the other third. And so it's really important. So, and it has a lot to do with street design elements that I was showing you. So anybody that's interested in the street design, things like the Broadway Complete Streets project, should really listen to this guy talk about his plans for Freeport Boulevard. Okay, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I think, let's see. The ADU law is separate from SB 9. There are two types of ADUs allowed in Sacramento, an ADU and a JADU. And there are different requirements for attached versus detached ADU and JADU.
True.
And I think
this was
going
not
up.
this was not a residential forum. So we didn't cover ADUs. We just mentioned them where it intersected with this forum. So there's a whole section on ADUs at landpark.org, land use projects. Take a look at that. It's some good stuff there.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Thank you very much, Bev, for the help.
Good night to everyone. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna shut down yet, but if people are still talking, I'm just gonna stop the recording. So.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Kirk. Talk to you soon. It's Andrea.